All right, so picture this. It's the late 90s. Dial-up internet is how you connect, and CDs are still the way most people buy music. Then out of nowhere, this 19-year-old kid named Shawn comes up with this incredible idea that changes everything. Napster.
It's a name that would go down in history. Launched on June 1st, 1999, Napster was a file-sharing application like nothing before it. At its core, it used a centralized database, which made it simple for users to share MP3 files with others. That bit's crucial, because older methods like IRC or Usenet could be a bit, well, clunky in comparison.
Yeah, exactly. Napster wasn't just for tech-savvy people, it was super user-friendly. You just search for a song, and boom, you could download it in minutes. And most importantly, it was free. Free music. Can you imagine? For those of us coming out of the CD era, it felt like magic.
Magic, or maybe a bit like a vending machine that didn't ask you to pay. The thing is, Napster worked by indexing all the music files that people were sharing on their local computers. It wasn't decentralized like later systems, and that central database became both its strength and its Achilles heel.
But before we get to what happened later, let's bask in the golden days. I remember being in college when I first stumbled upon Napster. I'll never forget that feeling of typing in Beatles bootlegs. Not the regular stuff, but rare, unreleased tracks. Stuff you'd never find in a store.
Right. And that's part of what made it so appealing. Napster wasn't just about the widely available music. It became a haven for hard-to-find recordings, old concert bootlegs, and live sessions that were otherwise collecting dust. And it wasn't just the Beatles. People could suddenly find underground artists, regional records. It opened up this entirely new world.
Oh, and the numbers were staggering. At its peak, Napster had 80 million registered users. Can you believe that? It was like everyone with internet access was hopping on this platform to share and discover music.
It really was revolutionary. Think about it. 86% of college dorm network traffic at the time was coming from Napster. Some universities even started banning it because it was clogging up their entire systems. But even that couldn't stop its rise. Napster was unstoppable for a while anyway.
Napster's rise felt unstoppable, didn't it? But as with any revolution, there were consequences. At first, it was all free music and excitement, but then the legal bomb hits. And it wasn't just small artists. Some of the biggest names in music came gunning for them.
Yeah, the lawsuits were massive. Metallica was one of the first to act. They realised their song I Disappear was being shared on Napster before it was officially released. And, well, they weren't exactly thrilled about it. That snowballed quickly.
Oh, not thrilled at all. They didn't just sue Napster, they actually handed over thousands of usernames of people who were sharing their songs. Can you imagine getting called out by Metallica themselves?
Right, and it wasn't just Metallica. Dr. Dre joined in after Napster failed to pull his work following a takedown request. And then came the big guns, the record labels. They filed a suit under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DMCA, claiming that Napster wasn't just enabling copyright infringement, it was built on it.
Yeah, and Napster didn't exactly deny that. They admitted that their users were sharing copyrighted material. But here's the thing. They argued that their tech had legitimate uses too, and that they shouldn't be held accountable for how people used it. It's kind of like saying, hey, don't blame the car for speeding tickets, right?
Exactly. But the courts didn't buy it. Even though Napster suggested they could block most of the infringing material, 99.4% to be exact, that wasn't enough for the judges. They basically said, it needs to be 100% infringement-free, which, honestly, was an impossible standard.
Oh, and let's not forget the billion-dollar proposal. Do you remember that? Napster was like, look, let's just pay the big players $1 billion over 5 years and call it even. But even that offer didn't smooth things over.
No, it didn't. And this wasn't just a legal battle, it also became a cultural moment. On one side, you had Metallica and the record industry saying, this is theft. And on the other side, there were millions of users, and some artists like Radiohead, saying, "This is the future of music."
Right. Radiohead's albums Kid A actually benefited from being leaked on Napster. Millions heard it before its release, and then it hit #1 on the Billboard charts. So for some, Napster wasn't just stealing, it was promoting, a tool for discovery.
But for others, it was a wake-up call about the value of intellectual property in the digital age. Metallica's drummer, Lars Ulrich, was clear that they were protecting musicians' rights. Yet, it also made them, and others, seem out of touch with what younger fans wanted: access and lots of it.
And by the way, this whole thing wasn't just about music. It sparked a much broader conversation about copyright laws in the internet age. Who controls what gets shared online? And how do you find balance between creators and consumers?
Exactly. Napster wasn't just a software. It became a battleground for debates about creativity, ownership, and technology. And though they tried to transform into a subscription-based model, the damage, or depending on your perspective, the revolution, had already begun.
Napster became the battleground for debates about creativity and technology. But when it shut down in 2001, that wasn't the end of the story. If anything, it was just the beginning. Napster's impact set the stage for a new era in digital music, sparking an explosion of other file-sharing platforms like LimeWire, Nutella, and of course BitTorrent. It was like Napster had lit the match.
Exactly. And unlike Napster, these newer services were decentralized, meaning they didn't rely on a central server. This made them harder to shut down. It was as if the music-sharing landscape had evolved overnight, adapting to the legal and technical challenges Napster had faced.
Right. And yeah, while those platforms weren't exactly solving the copyright issues, they definitely carried the same risks. They also showed just how much demand there was for easier ways to access music. People were moving faster than the big companies could keep up.
And let's not forget what happened to the Napster brand itself. After the shutdown, its assets were bought by Roxio, who rebranded it as Napster 2.0, an online music store. It eventually merged with Rhapsody, and by 2016, it fully re-emerged under the Napster name as a streaming service.
Oh, and the story didn't stop there. In 2022, Napster was acquired by these blockchain companies Hivemind and Algorand. The idea? Integrate it into Web3 and give artists even more tools to connect with audiences. Honestly, that's such a full circle moment, isn't it?
It really is. Napster began as this rebellious, almost anarchistic way of sharing music, and now it's part of a movement aiming to leverage blockchain technology for transparency and fairness in the music business. It's a fascinating transformation.
But here's the big question. What's Napster's legacy? Did it destroy traditional music sales, or was it actually a catalyst for the streaming revolution we have today?
I think it's both, honestly. Napster absolutely disrupted physical sales. You can't deny that. CD sales plummeted, and the music industry struggled to adapt for years. But at the same time, it paved the way for platforms like Spotify and Apple Music to thrive. Napster proved that people wanted access over ownership, and that lesson shaped the industry forever.
And it wasn't just the big players who learned from Napster. Artists started experimenting, finding new ways to connect with fans directly, whether through Bandcamp, Patreon, or even their own streaming setups. It opened up so many possibilities for them.
Absolutely. While Napster wasn't the perfect tool, it came with its legal and ethical challenges. It forced a shift in how we think about music as a product. It pushed the industry towards innovation, even if it had to stumble along the way.
And on that note, I think we've come full circle on Napster's journey, from its chaotic beginnings to its lasting impact on music and technology. It wasn't just a piece of software, it was a revolution.
A revolution that's still echoing today. Well, that's all for this episode. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.